Hey everyone, welcome back to The Explainer. Today we're grabbing a flashlight and shining it directly at one of the absolute biggest cultural juggernauts of our time. We're going to explore Ron Wellington's fascinating book, Hidden in Plain Sight, to uncover the scrappy, improvised, literally duct-taped reality behind a truly legendary space saga. We're stripping away all that cinematic polish to see the actual, real human hands that built a galaxy.
Now, you might be thinking, I know everything there is to know about this. And hey, fair enough. You've probably watched these movies a dozen times. You know the characters, you can hum the music, you definitely know the glowing swords. But honestly, how much did you actually miss? Think of this explainer as your personal guided tour through the hidden cinematic secrets, the hilarious filming errors, and the deep historical blueprints that are hiding right there in the corners of the frame.
All right, so think of this as our secret hunter's map for today. We're covering the impossible gamble, the used universe aesthetic, bloopers and accidental magic, deliberate Easter eggs, and finally, myths, history, and influences. Okay, let's dive into this.
Section 1. The Impossible Gamble, the Myth of the Master Plan.
You know, we tend to look back at massive franchises as if their success was just entirely inevitable, like it was always meant to be. But the reality? This saga was never supposed to work. The myth is that it was this perfectly pre-planned cultural juggernaut, but the reality was a completely chaotic, underfunded shoot. The studio expected a total flop. I mean, they practically gave away the merchandising rights to the director because they thought toy rights for a space movie were worthless. No way, right? Meanwhile, over in the Tunisian desert, the shoot was getting hammered by freak rainstorms, literally the worst they'd had in decades, and all these expensive robotic props just flat out refused to work in the heat. Getting even a single shot was a massive struggle.
And that wild chaos on set perfectly sets up this next point. The very first cut of this film, it was a famous disaster. Studio executives thought it was flat, confusing, and just way too slow. The actual rescue operation happened in the edit. A brilliant team of editors, which actually included the director's then-wife, came in and completely reshaped the pacing. They tightened up that climactic space battle and found the thrilling momentum that literally saved the movie. That editing work was so crucial it went on to win an Academy Award, proving for sure that the magic was assembled in the cutting room just as much as on set.
Moving on to Section 2, the used universe aesthetic. Scrappy practical magic. So before this saga came along, sci-fi was mostly just gleaming chrome, silver jumpsuits, and really tidy futures. But the creators here wanted a dusty, dented, lived-in realism. And the resourcefulness of the model makers to achieve that was just legendary. They heavily relied on a practice called greebling. Some people call it kit bashing. Basically, if you look really closely at those massive, awe-inspiring space vessels, their surfaces are absolutely covered in tiny, meaningless plastic parts. And where did they get them? They just glued on pieces from commercial model kits of tanks, cars, and airplanes. They practically raided local hobby shops to give these ships that complex, busy, realistic industrial texture.
And the scrappy, low-budget extremes absolutely did not stop there. The cinematic illusion gives us this terrifying, swirling field of deadly asteroids tumbling through the dark depths of space. But the studio reality? Well, the effects team needed a ton of drifting bodies, so they used potatoes. Ordinary potatoes, painted and photographed against a black background. Actually, there's even a really well-supported claim that at least one crew member's shoe was hurled past the camera to join the asteroid swarm. Talk about movie magic.
Okay, so they're solving impossible visual problems with potatoes and glue, but what about the audio? Let me ask you, how do you create the sound of a futuristic laser blaster from scratch?
You do it by going out and finding weird, organic sounds in the real world. That sharp, ricocheting pew of a blaster, that was created simply by taking a hammer or a wrench and striking the taut, steel guy wires of a radio tower. The metallic tang travels down the cable and bounces back into the microphone. It's brilliant. And similarly, you know that iconic, low humming sound of those glowing energy swords? That was literally just the idling hum of an old film projector motor, mixed together with the buzz of interference they picked up from a broken television set.
All right, Section 3, bloopers and accidental magic. The beauty of preserved mistakes.
Look, over a crazy, tight 2-year shoot, mistakes are going to happen. But if we look at these films like a giant palimpsest, a manuscript that's been written over multiple times, we can see how leaving these on-set errors in the film actually added this amazing handmade human texture. Let's look at 3 iconic examples. First up, the famous head bonk. During a tense raid, an armored soldier totally misjudges a low doorframe and visibly smashes his helmet into it. The creators eventually loved this very human mistake so much that they actually added a loud bonk sound effect in later releases. Then there's the mismatched leg. The famous fussy golden droid actually has a silver leg from the knee down. Generations of fans thought this was a continuity error, but actually, scratch that. It was totally intentional design to show he'd been patched together over the years. And finally, those slightly stiff, wobbling aliens in the background scenes, not a mistake either. That's just the honest physical limit of actors wearing incredibly heavy, hot, practical creature suits.
Which brings us to Section 4, Deliberate Easter Eggs, Secrets Hidden on Purpose.
So shifting away from the accidental mistakes, let's talk about the intentional signatures secretly planted by the creators for attentive fans to hunt down. If you only remember one Easter egg from this explainer, make it this one, 1138. This specific number is the director's ultimate calling card. It comes directly from the title of his very first feature film. And once you know it, you'll see it everywhere. Throughout the saga, 1138 is stenciled on cell blocks, it's spoken aloud as a prisoner designation, it's printed on pilot uniforms, it's basically the filmmakers quietly reaching into the frame and initialing their artwork.
And then we have the signature sound, the stock scream. This is this brief kind of comic yelp that was actually recorded decades earlier for a 1950s adventure film. The sound team adopted it as their own private inside joke, and they just kept tucking it into the saga whenever a minor character gets blasted backward or knocked off a high ledge. It was so funny to them that it eventually spread way beyond this franchise and became this massive industry-wide in-joke hidden across decades of Hollywood cinema.
Section 5. Myths, History, and Influences. The ancient roots holding it all together.
To really see how all of this scrappiness builds into something timeless, we've got to look at the deep architectural blueprints of the saga. The deepest secret here is the actual shape of the story itself. The director anchored his chaotic space production directly to the monomyth, otherwise known as the hero's journey. This is a thousands of years old storytelling mold identified by comparative mythologists. It always follows a pattern. You have the call to adventure, meeting the wise old mentor, crossing the threshold into a dangerous new world, facing the supreme ordeal, often in the belly of a machine, and finally the return. Forcing this wild space adventure into this ancient storytelling mold is exactly what gives it such massive emotional weight. We feel like we've heard it before because, structurally speaking, it is literally the oldest story humanity has.
And aesthetically, the saga didn't just invent its visual language from scratch. It brilliantly fused three entirely distinct cinematic genres. First, from Japanese samurai films, it took the unique perspective of following two lowly, bickering peasants, who became our famous droids, along with the martial arts robes and discipline codes of warrior monks. Second, from the American Western, it lifted the dusty frontier outposts, the tense cantina standoffs, and, of course, the cynical smuggler with a hidden moral code. And third, from those cheap 1930s chapter play serials, it borrowed the numbered episodes, the breathless action pacing, and those really distinct old-fashioned optical wipe transitions between scenes. The absolute genius of it was weaving these old, familiar threads into a pattern that literally no one had ever seen before.
So the crucial point here is that you now have a totally new way of seeing these movies. Here is your actionable Secret Hunters checklist for your next rewatch. I want you to look closely at those starships and try to spot the greebled model kit tank parts. Keep your eyes peeled for the number 1138. Keep your ears open for that half-second stock scream when a bad guy falls. Try to catch those old-school optical wipes between the scenes. And, for sure, watch for the armored soldier absolutely bonking his head in that doorway.
I want to leave you with this one final, provocative thought. If the most legendary cinematic illusions of our time are really just a messy palimpsest of painted potatoes, model kits, stolen sound effects, and ancient myths, does knowing the trick ruin the magic? Or does it make the human craft, the compromise, and the sheer luck of it all even more astonishing? Personally, I'd argue it's absolutely the latter. This is an untouchable, perfect art from the gods. It's a glorious, scrappy human triumph. And now, you know exactly how to hunt through it yourself. Thanks so much for joining this explainer, Focus Learners. Catch you next time.